There we go. Hello and welcome. We're going to have an online session here today about how to study abroad in the USA and how Stanford Academies can help you with your goals of studying abroad. Let's start first with just a little introduction. So, education in America. It can be basically categorized in several different parts. So preschool we have obviously, which is kind of an optional school that you can attend as a toddler. From there we go on to primary school, which in the US we call elementary school. Then we have a middle school, which is essentially junior high, and secondary school, which is high school. After high school, there are several different options available to you. And these are basically post-secondary, so they can be colleges, technical schools, and universities. Usually people are going to attend universities after they graduate from high school. And actually that's what we're going to be talking about mostly today, colleges and universities. Okay. Another thing that you need to understand is that in the US, it's not very strongly centralized, but there is a centralization that happens in Washington, D.C. And basically most educational institutions, especially ones that take money from the United States government, they are overseen by the Department of Education. The Department of Education has several different roles, and one of them is to provide federal financial aid. Much of which, unfortunately, as an international student, you will not be able to use, but there are other options, and we'll talk about that. It also collects data on America's schools, so if you are looking at maybe attending one particular school or another one and you're not sure which one to choose, the Department of Education actually has some information that might help you in this. They also focus on key educational laws and issues, for example, equal rights, any kind of discrimination, affirmative action, things like this. And and according to this, that also prohibits discrimination and makes sure that people have equal access to all of the universities or colleges' resources. And of course, it also works to improve teaching performance. So there are lots of trainings that you can go to as a teacher through the Department of Education, and maybe learn something new or work on some skills maybe that you had forgotten and you need to remember. Okay. One of the main thing is that you want to do when you start your study abroad, journey to studying abroad, is to research your options. So think about this for a moment. Why is it that you want to study in the US? Is there something specific about it? What type of school best suits you? Are you more interested in some kind of an institution that deals mainly with law or with medicine, or maybe you're just not sure yet? So yeah, there's this as well. Also, will you need financial assistance? So lots of universities are quite expensive actually, especially the private ones. It gets really expensive. So is money kind of an issue for you? Do you need to find ways to get more financial assistance? And what are the application deadlines? This is also something that varies from institution to institution. Maybe one institution says that the due date's going to be, in June. Another one says in April. So knowing when the application deadlines will be is extremely important. It's best actually to start 18 months before you actually are predicting your enrollment. This is because it's going to take a long process, which we can help with at Stanford Academies. That's what we've been doing in the past under the Institute for North American Studies, actually originally. But we're moving into Stanford Academies now, so we're happy to work with them on that. And also you need to start preparing for your Scholastic Aptitude Test, which is also known as the SAT. Maybe if you're planning on taking IELTS or TOEFL or any kind of a master's program, if you're planning on getting into that, you need to take your GRE or GMAT or GCAT or anything like this. Okay. Basically, we have several different options for getting a degree in the United States. I have, no, I can recommend actually getting an associate's first. It's quite simple, straightforward. It only takes 1 to 2 years, depending on what you have. I have 2 of them actually, one for technical and one for arts. So I can recommend it. And then after that, you can get your bachelor's degree. You can actually transfer the associates to getting a bachelor's degree at a university. But if you start immediately going to the university to get a bachelor's, then it's going to take about 3 to 4 years. Of course, master's, it'll take longer. And doctorate, of course, will take the longest. And of course, depending on which field of medicine that you're planning on going into, or which field you're planning on studying, it could take significantly longer, even up to 10 years sometimes. Okay. So one of the ways that you can, you can find your school, actually. So we offer this particular program here at Stanford Academies. So you're welcome to contact us. Our website is stanfordacademies.com. You can also find an educational advising center. And actually there's one here in Kyiv that you can go to, called American Councils Kyiv, which also offers the SAT, by the way. And then there's also the College Navigator, which again is actually sponsored by the Department of Education in the United States. So you can go there and kind of see which programs are the best. And then we also have another one that's sponsored by the US government. It's the Student Exchange and Visitors Program. You can see which schools offer different exchanges and things like this. So maybe like one of the university students or one of the school students is going to be coming to Ukraine to study, for example, and you could go in their place in the US, kind of like just a switch. Okay. All right. So now we come to the main issue here. Yeah, it's financing your studies. How are you going to pay for all this stuff? Again, this is just a general overview. At Stanford Academy, we also have more in-depth analysis about how to help and what options you have available to you. But basically, you can find out the cost of living. You can do this by going to numbeo.com, and there they will, like if you type in the city name, for example, where the university is going to be, you can see what an average rent is going to be, average cost of groceries, things like this. Or if you're actually already accepted to your university, you can also contact the ISO, the International Student Organization, and they can give you some like recommendations and things like this. There are lots of ways as well when we talk about scholarships to get funding. Yeah, so if you go online, you can see internationalscholarships.com. They've got a nice plethora, lot of selections of different types of scholarships that you can apply for. And careeronestop.org is also another one. They can help you with finding some scholarships. And sometimes the university has scholarship pages specifically that you can go to. And this is another little trick, actually, but universities will also have unannounced scholarships or funding. So if you're interested in a university, and they don't advertise this, it doesn't mean that they don't have it. So you need to actually apply for it, and we have some special ways of figuring out at Stanford how we can help you with that. For those of you who are interested in master's degrees or higher, you can also apply for teaching assistantships. So basically you're working with the university, or working for the university, I should say. And during your time there, you're going to be teaching, making an income, but also you'll be working on your master's degree. And same thing with administrative assistantship. They're going to be employing you, the university will be employing you, as well as allowing you to study at the university. So it makes it quite convenient in many cases for students who are looking for a master's degree to get from a university in the US to actually get one. It's a lot more viable than if you're going in as a freshman. And of course, if you're planning on becoming a doctor of some kind, then they also have fellowships that you can check with your university, see what they offer. Or sometimes companies will also sponsor, so it's also something to consider. Okay. As far as working while you're studying, there are a few different options that are available for you. So if you get an F1 visa, you can work in several different ways. I think it's probably the most versatile when it comes to being able to work in the US while you're studying. So they have different things where you can actually work, and you can work up to 2 years, I believe, at this point, up to 2 years after you've graduated. So it allows you maybe to do some kind of an externship or internship. You can also get some experience in the field, and sometimes, in many cases, if you are a promising student, you graduate successfully and you're working in a company that is directly related to the field of study that you have and you're doing well, they might even actually consider keeping you on even longer, which means that you can extend your stay in the United States as a resident, essentially. So yeah, there's lots of different programs there. You can do the optional practical training. You can do different things with science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. They've got lots of stuff there. So yeah, it's best to check with your university and see what's going on with that, or the ISO, your International Student Organization on campus. Okay. And then of course, there are actually 3 different visas that you can apply for as a student, and there's one other one that we'll talk about, but the M1 visa will only allow you to work after you have studied. So it won't allow you to work during your studies. So if you're planning on maybe making some kind of an income to support yourself while you're studying at the university, an M1 is not the way that you want to go. You want to get an F1 or a J1, which we'll talk about in a moment. Okay, and some basic documents that you want to send to your university. Of course, you want to contact the university beforehand, because if you just send them everything, you'll need to get your application. First of all, they usually have some kind of an application that you need to download or to request personally from them. Then you're going to have your original transcripts. So, and you want to make sure that they're certified. It's a certified copy of your academic records. So you'll need to go to some kind of like a notary to get them notarized, or sometimes universities will have that option, or schools will have that option in your home country. So you'll need to do that. You'll also want to work on standardized test scores, on preparing your documents for that. So if you took the SATs, you'll want to have the official letter that they have, maybe some kind of a copy. Again, you might want to get it notarized just in case. You'll also need the IELTS or TOEFL. I actually would encourage more the IELTS than the TOEFL, just because I think that the IELTS is a little bit more realistic. And I can explain why maybe in a few moments, but essentially that's what I would recommend. Any recommendation letters from maybe some past employers, friends, family members. Try to stay away from family members unless it's an absolute must, but yeah, it can be friends, employers, maybe teachers, and if you need to, get them translated into English, because the likelihood that the person that's looking at your application and saying that you didn't translate, from German into English, or Ukrainian or Russian into English, it might be a little bit difficult to process your application. It might just go straight to the bin. So keep that in mind. And then, of course, most universities require some kind of a personal essay, which we also offer support with at Stanford Academies. So. Yeah, so I was talking before about the Department of Education. they offer lots of resources, but unfortunately, the U.S. has no single authority to evaluate foreign credentials. So, if you're applying to your university, it might be only that university that accepts certain credit, but other universities don't. So it definitely depends on where you're planning on going, and you'll need to contact the university or institution to find out more about how they kind of decide what is going to be considered legitimate and what isn't going to be considered legitimate, or what can get you credit and what can't. Especially if you're planning on transferring in from maybe if you're going to a university in your home country, and then you decide that you're going to transfer in as an international student, which is often the case in the U.S. You'll need to make sure that those units, those credits that you took in your home country, are going to count to some extent in the U.S. as well, because sometimes they won't recognize. Yeah, so you'll have to contact. It might also vary by employer. So some employers might not consider different universities legitimate. Yeah, there's a lot of because there's so many different organizations, so many different educational institutions in the U.S. There's sometimes room for fraud. So you need to do a lot of research, find out is the university or institution, is it credible? Because sometimes your employer is not gonna care if you pay, just like $15 for a special certificate, or usually if it's if it's so cheap, that should be obvious. Yeah. Sometimes they'll charge lots and lots and lots and lots of money for their different degree programs. Yeah, and after you finish, you realize, it's useless, it's worthless, I wasted my time. They're just, we call them diploma factories. They're just trying to get you out with a diploma, but in reality, they don't really give you any real skills or knowledge. So it's something to look for as well. And sometimes if you're going into things like healthcare or with law, these also can vary by state. So states have different rules about who can be considered, what kind of education is necessary in order to get this particular job in this state and which ones aren't. So, and usually it has to be inside that particular state, or you need to go through some kind of special process as well. So that's something to consider. Where you plan on doing your internships is a big thing. For standardized tests, it's pretty straightforward if you're an undergrad. Just an SAT and an English proficiency exam like IELTS or TOEFL. IELTS, I think, is accepted by more and more and more, I think, than TOEFL. TOEFL's kind of, I think it's starting to move out, being phased out a little bit by the IELTS. So if you want, it's better, I think, to do the IELTS. And actually, if you end up deciding to go to a European university, it's more likely that they're going to accept IELTS than TOEFL. So in general, I think IELTS is just a better way to go. If you're planning on getting a graduate degree, then of course you want to do your IELTS or TOEFL, but you'll also need to do your GRE, and sometimes in addition to that, or instead, depending on which university you're planning on going to, you'll need to do the GMAT, the MCAT, LSAT, DAT, or whatever else it is that you're planning on getting into, right? Depending on what your goals are. As for taking the SAT, there are a few places that you can go to. Obviously, there's 3 on the screen. If you're located in Ukraine, you can go to the Kyiv Medical University of the UAFM. I'm not really sure what the UAFM actually stands for, but so Kyiv Medical University has this. You can contact Zoya, and she'll put you into the right right place and get you moving in there. You can also contact the American Council's Kyiv, which I mentioned earlier, and their phone numbers are listed there, as well as their address in Kyiv as well. And also Kyiv International School holds SAT tests. I believe they have special days for their students and then special days for non-students of KAS. So you don't actually have to be a student at KAS in order to take this exam, as far as I know. But if that's changed, then you can always contact, like I said, the earlier two choices, like Kyiv Medical University or the American Council's Kyiv. Okay. Earlier I was talking about IELTS or TOEFL. So, like I said, I think that IELTS is the better way to go, just because actually in the US, it's accepted by more than 3,400 institutions. That's actually current of this year, 2020. So if you're interested in finding out more about whether your chosen institutions are going to accept the IELTS, you can contact them, or usually they list it on their website in the ISO page, the International Student Organization page. So you can find out more there. But if you're interested, there's also a database actually that you can go and you can see which institutions accept the IELTS. And yeah, for 2020 it was 3,400. I think in Britain it was something like 800 and something. So when you consider that IELTS is usually considered to be British English, well actually that's not true, because it's international and America is very friendly towards international education. So they want you guys, if you're a good student, they want you to come and study at their university. Where to take IELTS, you can go to either the British Council or you can go to the IDP offices, which is located through Students International. Either of these you can register for. I think it's the same price at both. And usually, I think British Council and Students International, they kind of have a deal where speaking tests are basically, interchangeable. You could be going to either one. Depending, but as for actually sitting the exam, you go to these particular places. And right now it's the quarantine, unfortunately, so as far as I know, Students International is moving online. I'm not sure about British Council. I imagine they're probably going to move online, but Students International is already, or IDP is already taking candidates for online testing, so there is an avenue for this if you decide at some point in the future to take this. Okay. For getting letters of recommendation, there's a few things that you can consider. So make sure that you are working with people and you ask people that know you. Yeah, so don't ask just random teachers or counselors or strangers or even administrators that don't really know you that well. It's going to make for an awkward conversation. I've been a teacher at a Ukrainian school, and I had some people who came up to me and asked me for such kinds of letters, and I hardly worked with them during the year, so there was nothing really that I could say. So yeah, just make sure that if you're going to be asking for letters of recommendation, that you're working closely with those teachers in some way so that they have lots that they can say about you that's good. Yeah, make sure that you give the person, a generous amount of time, maybe about 2 weeks, but a month is better. And you can even ask them to save the letter so that you can use it for other schools, maybe if you're planning on applying to more than one. And make sure that you don't ask people who you think will write a letter poorly or include any negative content. So basically what that means is that if you're going to be going to a, let's say, math professor at your school who doesn't really know how to write letters very well, they might need some work, but you can work with them a little bit on that, and or they might ask you just to write the letter yourself, and then they'll just sign it. It just depends. But English is definitely a good way to go. I can recommend it. And they've got lots of directions and stuff on how to write letters of recommendation online too, so they can always do that as well. Okay, and again, as I said before, make sure that you include translations if there's the need. Okay. Yeah, and as far as your personal statement, so you'll probably need to, well, most universities will require some kind of a personal statement from you as an international student. So if you are interested in getting any feedback or editing help, we also offer this at Stanford Academies. We need at least 1 week to make sure that you can send another draft if necessary. So usually takes about 7 days. But sometimes because business is a bit slow right now as far as that, it's May. So most have already finished with their submissions. But if you're interested in having somebody, maybe if you want to start, now is the perfect time. Because in summer we're going to get busier, and in September it's just going to get even more busy than that. So May and June is your best time to do this if you want a fast response. Okay. Now, before I mentioned about student visas, and we're going to just go through a little bit more and how the different visas are different. Okay. So as I said before, there are 3 types. There is the student visa F, which will allow you to work off campus up to 2 years after graduation, as well as during your studies for, I think, up to 20 hours. And then you have student visa M, which means that it's only for vocational stuff. So if you're planning on doing any kind of maybe becoming a doctor or some kind of what else? Doctors, lawyers, MBAs, anything like this, you'll only be able to get work related specifically to your academic training. So yeah, that's something else to consider. And student visa J will allow you to work only on campus. So you won't be able to work off campus. You won't be able to work after 2 years. It'll only be on campus during your studies. Some of these obviously are going to be easier to apply for than others. Less paperwork and less wait time. So it just kind of depends. After you've been accepted by the university, and if they are SCVP approved, you'll be able to register in the SEVIS program, or the SEVIS system. There is you'll need to pay a fee using their different systems, and then you'll need to, the school will actually, after you've applied for this and you've paid everything, the school will issue you a Form 120, or a Form I-20 rather. And this I-20 you're going to take with you when you go to the U.S. And actually, when you arrive in the U.S., you go to the International Student Organization on campus, and you give them this form, and it basically just allows you to start your visa. So they understand that you're there legally, and you can get things like your bank account, you can get a cell phone, you can get, what else? You can start looking for work on campus. They can allow you, they can move along with the process in this way. So there's lots of benefits actually for turning in your I-20 form when you arrive. And as well, when you go to the embassy, when you do your interview, this is something that you can also use to show. Because if you've been accepted, then of course they're going to be more willing to approve your visa when you go to study in the U.S. In order to apply, though, you'll need to go to the embassy. The website is, you can do this actually online. So you'll need the form DS-160. And basically you fill it out online, and then you print it out, or you print out the confirmation page rather. And then you pay the fee, which is around $160, but it could be cheaper, and it could even be free, actually, depending on what the conditions are. So that's definitely something to consider. and to explore more about. Then when you go to the embassy, you'll need to bring all the different papers that are needed. For example, if you have any transcripts, anything that is regarding your documents for studying abroad, and make sure that you bring them in a transparent folder. You will not be allowed to bring any electronics, backpacks, suitcases, bags, anything like this, so you can't record your... they're very paranoid, actually. They don't want you to record the different questions that they ask you and things like this. It's kind of a... They just want to make sure that everything is done fairly and that you're not prepped before to lie to them. They want basically the full and nothing but the truth. So you'll want to bring, obviously, your Form I-20 from the university that they gave you, any financial documents that you'll have. These could include things like scholarships, bank accounts, loans, anything like this that you're planning on using. And then, of course, your service fee receipt, the one that you paid, the $160 or so. And then any educational documents like test scores, transcripts, diplomas, certificates, and so on for F1 visas, right? So the most liberal of visas. If you want to find out more about what's needed or what isn't allowed, you can go on to the U.S. Embassy website. I have here the website for the Ukrainian embassy, or for the Ukrainian, the U.S. Embassy to Ukraine on the screen, so you can go there and find out more information. But yeah, something to be aware of is that if you are going to be planning for this this visa, it is not a permanent. It's not going to be for a permanent immigrant, right? So it's not going to be as difficult or as vetted, maybe, as if you were going to be applying as a permanent immigrant to the U.S. Of course, they're going to want to make sure that you're going to be truthful, and the documents are more or less like not fraudulent. I haven't heard of many instances where people have been refused from studying in the U.S. It's probably something that I think is the easiest visa to get, just because if you have the money and you have the the documentation to show, it's a pretty straightforward process, actually. But things like questions like this, where you may be asked to explain how you will use your education after returning home, they might be wondering, what's your real reason for studying in the U.S.? What's so special about this university that you're planning on going to? Right, so this is also something to consider. But you can also find out more information by going to our website, stanfordacademies.com, and getting in touch with us, and we can help you with this process. We can do things like role play, for example, the different questions that they might ask you during the interview, so you're better prepared and you understand better, and you're not just kind of like thinking on the spot, because as students, there's a lot of stuff to go through, and sometimes even the smallest stuff gets forgotten. And of course, there's the State Department, where they can give you some more information about studying abroad in the U.S. Some things to look out for. One of the things that gets overlooked in the U.S., though, as far as finance by international students, are community colleges. And I want to speak with you just for a few moments about the benefits of studying at a community college for a couple of years instead of going straight to a university and studying there for 4 years. In the U.S., as I mentioned before, there's a 2-year degree that you can get called an associate's degree. And as I said before, I actually have 2 of them. I have an Associate's of Arts in Liberal Arts and an Associate's in Pharmacy Technology. I think that it's a great way of getting into your field of study. There's usually several different options where you can actually get a 2-year degree. While maybe it's not the main goal that you have, if you plan on transferring to a university at some point in the future, there's a better chance that if you have that 2-year degree, your credits will transfer better and easier. So there's less of a vetting if you've already got the degree. If you just study for 2 years and you don't have any degree to show for it, then they go through each individual class. They want to know more about it, and maybe they won't be so willing to give you full credits. You might get partial or no credit at all for that class that you spent time in. And many of the community colleges offer 2-year degrees in things like business, computer science, computer graphics, internet technology, any kind of IT sphere things, they offer this, which is a real benefit. And California, the home of the IT industry, there's lots of community colleges that you can go to, and it's for a fraction of the price that you would get, that you'd have to pay at a university. They also offer things like psychology, accounting, early childhood education, environmental studies, so just general things that you study for 2 years, and you can make it more specific when you transfer to a university, right? And then after you transfer to university, you only have to study for 1 to 2 years more, right? Which is much easier if you're looking for financial aid and support from that university. And you can see here the average prices. So if you go to a public 2-year college, a community college, so these are usually run by the state. They receive state funding, which is, from a federal standpoint, the U.S. government probably won't give you very much money when it comes to studying as an international student. But states, on the other hand, they might be welcoming of international students. So it's something to consider, definitely. But you can see here the average fee is about $3,440, and this is per year. So that's for 2 semesters, basically, right? That's going to be for from September to June, approximately. So that's pretty good, actually. $3,440. That's a reasonable price. Whereas if you go to a 4-year college, it's going to triple, right? It's going to be closer to $10,000. And then if you plan on going to, and that's for resident students. So that's not for international students. That's for, so you guys, if you're international students, you're going to be looking at the 4-year universities. So if you're an out-of-state student, like $23,000 is more like what you're going to be seeing. Or if you're planning on going to a private university for 4 years, it's going to be $32,000 per year. Right? So this is definitely something that you want to consider as far as community colleges. Of course, it might be a little bit more expensive because I have here the resident student version, not the non-resident. But in general, it's going to be less expensive than if you go to a public 4-year university as international students. So, yeah, and it's kind of like it's more open enrollment as well. So if you didn't do so well in school, or you don't have the grades that you can show that you did really, really well, that's okay. That's all right. You can go and you can still apply. Mostly all they need is just a high school diploma, which I believe if you get it notarized and translated and everything, it makes community colleges much more reasonable for you to attend. And also you'll need to maybe show some math and English proficiency. They might not allow you to go to higher levels of English classes until you've shown that you actually have that legitimate amount of English knowledge that you can show. But you might want to contact the community college for that, because sometimes they have their own specific tests and they don't use things like IELTS or TOEFL. So that's something to also consider when you do your investigation. These classes are usually much smaller as well. So in addition to being cheaper, they're usually smaller. So the average class size is going to be around 15 to 20 students per class, maybe even less if you're lucky. But at universities, it's going to go very quickly to 40 or even up to 80 students or more, depending on what university and what class it is. The focus is more on teaching rather than researching. So if you're planning on doing some kind of a master's degree, community colleges are not the option that you're looking for. But if you're not really sure what you're interested in or what you're looking at maybe in your future, but you still want to study abroad and get that experience, community colleges are a reasonable a reasonable option. They can help you in this because the education is going to be cheaper, and it's going to be, I think the emphasis is on teaching more than on researching, and you'll be able to have that like closer relationship with other students and also with your professor as well. They also offer a lot of other additional services for free or for a small price. When I was attending community college, they had writing labs that you could go to for free. All you had to do was just show that you were enrolled in an English class, and they gave you, up to a certain number of hours per week that you could go for free. Free tutoring as well. I used to work as a tutor on campus. They have a certification program that you can take if you're interested in that. But basically, you get a certain number of free hours per week or per month that you can use, and you can schedule to work with a tutor. They also have resource centers, so if you're interested in maybe getting some more information on certain things, they're like different programs or different different homework assignments that they've given you, and you don't have those resources like a computer, they have them there for you. And they have somebody who is on staff who can help you with finding the right information, where to go and what to do and all that stuff. And books as well, obviously. So usually textbooks can be quite expensive, and usually in the resource center they have textbooks that are available so you can use them for free. You can check them out. Sometimes it depends on how many textbooks that they have for that particular class. So yeah, it's a great resource. They also have counselors, health insurance, everything that you would expect from a university, because most universities offer health insurance, and most community colleges also offer health insurance. So if you're having some problems with maybe adjusting to university life, or with your adjusting to life studying abroad, there's counselors that you can go to, get some special treatment for, create some kind of an action plan maybe. You can get health insurance there, which is much cheaper than if you were to go to like a private insurance company. They also have on-site medical staff. Many of the community colleges have a doctor or a nurse that's on-site that you can go to. Just a large amount of services that community colleges can offer to you at a much, much lower price than going to a four-year university. So I highly, highly, highly recommend the experience. And again, going back to the visas, students with F1 visas can also complete some practical training after they've completed their associate's degree, and a second year after completing the bachelor's degree. So if you decide to do the community college thing, you can still stay in the US if you're working for up to 1 year. But then of course, if you decide to do your bachelor's degree after, then you'll get 1 additional year after you graduate with a bachelor's. You'll obviously need to contact the community college for more information about their externships or internship programs that they have, and whether or not you'll be able to qualify for those. I think the only difference is that universities have the ISOs, and some community colleges may not have International Student Organization for you to contact. So it's better to work with the community college, or you can come to us at Stanford Academies and we can kind of help you through the process. Some things to prepare for when you're planning on leaving. Make sure that you contact the International Student Advisor of your school. Let them know that you're coming, on what day, and when to expect you. Some universities, not the larger ones, but some universities will even offer you free transportation from the airport to the university where you're going to be staying. You can also contact the alumni from Ukraine. So if there are any that are close by in Kiev, for example, or in whichever city that you're in, they can put you in contact with some alumni, and they can kind of help you prepare what it is that you need to know how to prepare better, maybe for living abroad, what to expect. And you can also you might want to consider enrolling in a course on college life. We have one that we offer at Stanford Academies. We have actually several different courses that you can enroll in regarding university life. So if you're interested, you can always contact us for more information about that. Another thing actually that talking about preparing for college life in the USA is writing essays. So we have essay writing workshops that we host usually once or twice a month, depending on the demand. But you can contact us for more information at stanfordacademies.com because actually it is quite different from IELTS. It's not exactly the same as an IELTS essay. IELTS essays, while the academic version is very useful for understanding and responding to different topics and journal articles and things like this, it's not exactly going to prepare you when you actually have the real academic writing in America, because it's a little bit stricter than what the IELTS has in many cases. So we can offer you some workshops with this as well. And of course, in general, we're on our culturalization program that we have, talks about how you can prepare and expect to change from Ukraine or wherever you're studying at the moment, or wherever you're living at the moment, to studying in the US, what that's going to be like. We've got some information about US academic systems, some expectations, things like with housing, what to expect with that, coping in a new school, a new culture, just so that when you have the culture shock of living in the US, it'll be less likely that you'll go into kind of like a panic mode. You'll be better prepared, and you can focus your time and energy on studies rather than on interactions and stress with that. And of course, there's this particular website that you can go to. You can learn some stuff online. This is just general stuff. It's not really like I would recommend courses in our Stanford Academies, but if you don't have the time, this is one other source that you can do. It's usa.gov/life in the US. And you can learn some things like holidays, immigrants, medals and honors, money, how to manage time zones, official language, just general information, nothing too specific like that you might get at Stanford. So thank you guys very much for listening. I hope this was really informative for you and helpful. As always, if you're interested in contacting me and finding out more about how we can help you, you can go to stanfordacademies.com, or you can write me directly at steve@eltsteve.com, and I'll get back to you as soon as I possibly can. So yeah, I hope that this was helpful, and thank you very much for listening, and hope to hear from all of you soon.